My most recent journey took me to the town of Battle near Hastings, the site 950 years ago of the Battle of Hastings, if you can imagine such a thing. And while my camera, seeking apparently to take on William the Conqueror's first title, had eaten most all of my footage from Sunday, my other day's filming was left largely untouched. I spent most of that day speaking with craftsmen about their trade, and what footage has actually survived of those conversations I now humbly offer up to you, beginning with a humble wood carver and his young apprentice. Or his slave, I didn't actually ask.
There's not really a great deal of interest in carving, to be honest.
The end result is good though.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous, some of these
This
designs.
is a finished one. This is one I've done a long time ago. It's, you know, your beard, and it works really nice. This is done in beechwood. It's a hardwood. This is walnut wood. It's another hard nut, but it's got a beautiful grain. You can see by the bit on the back.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't be able to carve a softwood into these fine.
How long would you say it takes to complete something like a comb or these more intricate, the cross there, for example?
Well, the cross took me probably, I don't know, about 5 hours, something along those lines.
It's not that bad at all, all things considered.
I mean, this took lots of time because of this very intricate carving. It was probably about 20 hours work. So, you know, about a day and a half, 2 days.
Would carving be something of a trade back in the day, or is this just something that people would do to make tools for themselves?
A good wood carver would be required. It wouldn't be a fantastic trade, but a wood carver would be amongst the kind of top echelons of the poorer people, I suppose.
Back then they had so much spare time that they wouldn't leave all their just general furniture bare. If they could carve it, they'd carve
exactly.
it.
Yeah, fair enough, actually.
Any bare space was decorated. They were flamboyant people, dark age people. They loved colour.
Much against
you know, when you take into account that colour was very, very expensive. Pigments came from a long way away, generally the good pigments. So colour was considered very high status.
The Dark Ages is a misleading name.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, and of course, in all the television shows and everything, they're always just wearing brown and dirt and mud.
Yeah, no,
animal skin.
Exactly.
So much animal skin.
And it's not authentic to wear animal skins like that.
If
you're going to drape an animal skin over yourself, it's really cold. You wear clothes.
Yeah. But, I mean, a lot of the designs that go onto the carvings are also very meaningful. Everything told a story or a riddle or held a charm.
Is there
the
something?
Art was almost like the media of the day.
Is this meant to this piece here meant to portray something in particular, or is it just?
This one?
No, I'm sorry.
This one here. Yeah. Well, this is late Nordic work. It's ringerike and urn style that you see on a lot of the stave churches. This piece I've done up as a pagan piece. It's representing Yggdrasil, the tree at the end of time. And this character here is Loki, who was making so much mischief that the other gods tied him up to keep him safe.
Oh, one of those chains or
yes,
ropes?
Yeah, they're bombs.
Now I can see that. Right?
Yeah.
Was it Loki or Fenrir that was bound with the 7 impossible things?
I'm not sure. I know that Loki was bound because
Loki was bound because he brought about Ragnarok.
Yes.
Thor managed to stop it.
Yeah.
And Fenrir, his son, the wolf god, was bound with the 7 impossible things.
Right. Yeah. That's the first I've heard of that one.
I love Norse mythology. Brilliant.
Yeah. How about that one over there, the larger? I'm not entirely sure what you call
like
it.
The Nordic dog pot. He's going to mean the pagan equivalent of the solar cruciforms. This is depicting Odin out of one of the sagas where he was taught magic by Freya, and during the course of it he had to disguise himself as a woman So I thought it was be quite interesting to portray him as a woman as opposed to a mighty warrior, because he was also a master of disguise and magic. This here is Thor, and he's out hunting the world serpent. And this is part of the saga where he gets his hook caught up in like the seaweed. And this is a Valkyrie here. You can see by her top knot and her shawl. Sort of dives down and hooks him and assists him in his search for the serpent. That there, you can't really make it out. I haven't really defined it hardly at all yet. That is like a horse face mask from the Sutton Hoo burial. That design comes from, and that is representing Sleipnir, Odin's 8-legged horse. So
okay.
that there is just a little bit of binding knot work. That again is late Viking, but again I need to do a lot more to it. This here is depicting Valhalla, the drinking hall for the dead.
Endless fighting and drinking.
Endless fighting and drinking. Yep, they'd wake up in the morning and start drinking, and then by the end of the night they'd all be drunk and kill each other, and wake up in the morning to do it all again.
No, hang on.
This figure here is depicting the goddess Freya. Now, when she taught Odin magic, the gift he gave her was her pick of the dead. So she got first choice of the dead from the battlefield, and the rest went up into Valhalla. So this is depicting her choosing her fallen, and I think she had them to service the Valhalla, which are here again with their drinking cups and their shanks of meat to feed the fallen people. And this down here is a depiction of Hildesvin turning up on the shores of England, ready for rape, plunder and pillage.
In that order.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, well I was strictly there for the plunder, me. Rape and pillage wasn't my thing. This here is
pillage some churches.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, well I don't mind church girl.
And the monks just let you take it as well. They just
But
sit there
they
in the
can't
tower.
really fight back.
Yeah.
That's peaceful creatures.
That's here is another foliate binding piece for the side, and that there is my signature in runes. That reads "Peder of Hildesvin made me be." But I can't really finish that until I finish the rest, so it'll be a while before I finish that bit.
Next we have a metalworker, and I will include the link to his website down below. And with him I discussed grindstones and a little bit of shipbuilding, of all things.
So, yes, I had an apprentice slave. I had an apprentice slave, but she's run off.
It's an interesting system.
Right, so what you should have is a crank coming out, and you'd have a slave on each side, and if you look at the available documentary evidence we've got, that's what you had. And the grinder would lean over and grind laying down. I haven't got that. I haven't got a slave. I've got to do it myself. Knock this up, and so if I get, I've got to put longer legs on as well.
Oh, that's clever though.
You get it up to speed.
I'm not sure. No, I think this is an event all of its own.
Carry on. See?
And is there any sort of evidence to suggest this sort of system being used for if someone didn't actually own slaves, or
if you haven't got a slave, I could imagine. I mean, it's so basic. I'm sure someone would have got something like that.
I did some research into this point, and while I couldn't find any examples of a foot pedal being used that were expressly Saxon, I did find later examples of basically the same system being used. One here we see for, I believe, is a grindstone. It's actually a Cupid there sharpening an arrow. And another here for some sort of a loom, but again we see rather than a third party operating some sort of a lever, we see an individual with a foot pedal. And then with these two more either comical or morbid, depending on your perspective, I suppose, images, we see on one hand a fellow turning the wheel, and in the exact same scene on the other, we see a foot pedal being employed, the same exact kind that our Saxon friend was using at the event.
But if you feel the edge on that,
Yeah. Oh, it's quite fine.
so it does. And if you feel the side of the blade, you can feel it's quite polished.
Yeah.
It is a very fine stone.
But I think it's for press.
Very good.
And things like that.
But it wasn't got because it was a very fine stone. It was got because it was available. Then you go from that to this, and this is it's like a slate. It's layered.
Mm-hmm.
So this was like that, only I dropped it and got. But this is Norwegian schist. Wherever you found Viking settlements, you found Norwegian schist.
Mm-hmm.
And they've even found ships on the seabed of fjords and so on that are just loaded up, cargo boats full of Norwegian schist. That is the grindstone. It's a very fine grindstone, it's very effective, produces a fantastic edge, and it got exported all over the Viking world. But
Very good.
you do get some Vikings who are posers and show off their status because you can get Norwegian schist that is coloured. So you've got bands of colour from whatever it was that it was being made from. This is just plain grey.
Mm-hmm.
You can get this multicoloured pattern.
So that's the sort of thing that you might see just common,
So
like mass export as opposed to a more...
that would be common sharpening stone. But these fancy patterned ones would use for jewellery.
Okay.
And you can get them, you can still get them, but they've got a hole in one end.
Absolutely not. That's not what I wanted.
Just trying to think, there's one or two graves that have been found, and I think, well, there's certainly one that was in the Sutton
But
Hoo.
there's so many double entendres now that
But it was very much, you got this Norwegian schist, and if it was pretty patterned, you could put a hole in it and wear it from your belt. Because in those days it was the men that wore the jewellery.
Yeah, absolutely. Sign of wealth.
So you get people like my friend over there who gets into Anglo-Saxon stuff because in doing so he gets a chance to wear all the jewellery and
Look all nice and pretty.
yeah. This one. Very specific axe. Now I call this a smoothing axe. He calls it a Don, what do you call it?
It's a T-axe, and it's designed for taking when you split a log to make planks, the sections are V-shaped.
Mm-hmm.
You take the top sides off with one of those axes. You'll see a picture of one on the Bayeux tapestry, and it was specifically invented by the Vikings for shipbuilding. And allowed them to make their planks lighter.
If you think an ordinary axe, if you're trying to make a flat surface, it's got because of side axe. I call it smoothing. He calls it side axe.
Because the blade's to the side.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
If you look at that one, just the head, it doesn't matter what you do with that. It's going to hit at an angle and dig in.
Mm-hmm.
That you can run it down the face and take the lumps off.
I see. All right.
It's a simple
Basically, just a simple little technique to make it simpler.
But that's the technology that allowed the Vikings to build their boats.
A lot of stuff is technique as well, isn't it?
Their boats were lighter and faster. The steel was better, their swords were better.
Mm-hmm.
So they had
their thumbs are good.
the fighting technology and the transport to deliver it. Military people say you win.
Yep.
Oh, and the other thing that they could do that annoyed the Saxons built bridges across the rivers to stop warships coming up the rivers, and the Vikings could just fold the mast down and carry on under the bridge.
Now, this gentleman, I believe he was French, actually, so he didn't speak English all that well, but he did tell me he was building, or I should say carving out very slowly, the prow of a ship.
17 meters.
Very impressive work, then. How long does it take?
35 hours.
Wow.
But at the beginning I take a thermic saw.
Yeah. Very good, very good. Now, the obvious farbism of using an automatic saw aside, the work is still incredibly impressive, and here we can see a picture of what the design would ultimately look like. Next, we have a musician, and while my camera decided to eat the first half of his lecture, we still have his demonstration of music from around the 12th century, a little bit later, but the sort of music that was introduced by the Normans after their conquest.
Out there are all saying straight away, oh yes, of course, 15th day of August, that's Assumption, that is. You see, you've got to remember that Mary, the mother of Christ, did not die. On the 15th day of August, a crescent moon descended from heaven and touched down on planet Earth. And Mary, while still alive, stepped aboard this crescent moon and rose up into the heavens. Now that means that unlike every other soul that there is in heaven, Mary still has a viscera, a mortal body. Nobody else in heaven has got one of those. They were all left down on earth, but Mary has. So that viscera has to be beatified before she can sit on the left-hand side of God. And that's the title of this piece of music, Beata Viscera. Now normally we would require 3 people to sing this, 2 to sing the organum and 1 to sing the clausula over the top. So I'm going to sing 5 notes different from this little symphony here, so that between me and the instrument you will hear organum, and then Nell will sing the clausula, and you should get the full effect. So this is the beginning.
That's the organum. Here comes the clausula.
Could do with some more rosin on it now. It tends to wear out, does that? It's very difficult to get these things to actually do it outdoors on damp days. This is tree sap. We just put it on the wheel.
Is it a sort of lubricant then?
Yeah.
So
No, the opposite. The opposite.
Oh, add friction.
And you use it to help sing, so you keep pitch. And it
Fascinating.
was used in church, and you'd be surprised how far it was used in church. Used in church right into the 18th century. Yeah.
It's a shame we got rid of them.
Well, the reason we got rid of them was because in the 18th century they started to build west galleries in church and a string quartet, which was usually in this country a broken consort. So you'd see violins and cellos and violas, but then you might see a serpent, which is a wind instrument, underneath it all.
Okay.
Or you might see a violin, violas, and a boxwood clarinet. You know, in other words, these were the West Gallery associations, and they were proper orchestral things. So that's why these died out, because music became much more sophisticated than this. So by the end of the 12th century, humanity had mastered the art of how to write music and how to harmonise it as well. So, by that time, musicians now started to petition the Pope over this business about not being able to sing the 7th note. And wasn't it about time we moved away from these old superstitious ideas? So as you move into the 13th century, the Pope of Rome, he gives way on this issue, and it's now legal to sing all the notes of the scale, the full 8-note octave. So that's how we're going to finish off with a piece of music from the time of Magna Carta, or in the full 8-note scale. Now, we've chosen a love song, and we've chosen a love song that has a lovely twist in the tail. So I'll translate the words for you so you can understand it. To rejoice my heart, I wish to make a song. I wish to sing to you without argument of a very comely lass whom I love with all my heart. May God let it here appear. Indeed, I shall never tire of loving her, for she has captured all my heart in her net. Now it sounds like a beautiful love song so far, doesn't it? But this is the last line of the song. If the cuckold were to have his arms broken, I would find more favour with his wife. When I sing the 7th note, I'll point it out to you, so you can hear it, alright? Comme ancora lei si belle chanson terra, chantez-vous i vers chansons et donnez manera, certe jadami amène serre las, car le trouve encore prison celat, celle coule à voix, brosser les bras, si abrège dans sa femme mais de grâce. Jamais de pierre entière, on donne ce qu'il y perd. Comme ancora lei sia, il est nos chansons faire. Chantez-vous, i vers chantions, c'est donne molte bonheur. Well, I don't blame you see, because today we would never dream of singing it like that. Today we sharpen the 7th note. So, for example, if we're singing in the key of G, we would put an F sharp under